Hello. There it is. Turned off again. Nope, we're good. Guys, welcome. I'm really excited for tonight. It's been an honor to have Will here. Dr. Great. There's some people who, very, very humble. Will, you're one of those guys. I was trying to think of a good analogy, and I used to play a lot of volleyball, and there was this one time where this guy came and kind of coached and taught us a little bit. His name is Reed Pretty, and he's like he was in multiple Olympics and was currently on the beach volleyball circuit, and you listen to every word that he said because you're like, this guy is doing it. He's living the dream. And it's been really an honor. Will's kind of sat down with Oliver and I a couple times to talk about church stuff, and Will does this professionally. So it's fun to have you here, and we're thankful that you're serving the church with the gifts that God has given you. So I'm excited, and let me pray for us, and then we'll jump into it. Father, thank you for your goodness to us. Thank you for a church that is filled with people who love you and love your bride. Lord, thank you for the gifts that you've given us, the skills and talents that you give your church for your glory and for our good. I pray this evening that you would speak to us and lead us to be better listeners and better communicators. And Lord, I pray that you would build your church and that your kingdom would come here in Citylights. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, John. We just checked my mic. Justin, it sounds like it's working. Good evening, everyone. Glad to be with you. I just wanted to say it was interesting to find out that I'm still teaching at Clemson. So whoever did that, let me know what I'm supposed to be teaching, because it's been a few years. Evidently, the grapevine passed it along. I did used to teach at Clemson, but it's been since maybe 2010 since I was there, and I miss it, but part of the past now. I did not grow up as a believer, even though I grew up in a Christian home and in a Christian context. And I was talking with one of you earlier tonight that in some ways I think I didn't feel comfortable coming to know Jesus because there was a lot of lingo, and there was a lot of little barriers that felt like I wasn't really getting to know Jesus. I was getting to know maybe a club that I had not signed up for as an infant, but here I am. And by the time I got to be a teenager, I started to get really troubled about what is actually going on in life, and who am I, and why am I here, and what am we supposed to be up to? And that was not a community where listening was a very normal kind of thing. And so these questions I was asking, I think felt very challenging to the people I knew, and there wasn't a lot of listening happening, and I forgive them. That's okay. They were where they were. But there was a man that God put in my way, and his name is Dave Shoemate. Wherever you are, Dave, thank you. Dave was the first person in my life who would just sit with me in the questions that I had. And he would even say, genuinely, well, that's a good question. Sometimes he would say, I've never thought about that one before. And he would help me just to talk out my thoughts. And this was really the first counselor I had in my life. Now, I had other counselors that I was voluntold to go to when I was misbehaving, but I'm not sure that I was listening to them. Maybe they were listening to me. Dave was listening. And in many ways, tonight's session, I believe, piggybacks off Stuart Brenniger's session on counseling. Stuart is my counselor as well. So there was a real joy I wasn't here in person, but I got to see the recording. And I learned that many of you wanted to learn more about listening. I learned because John came and asked me if I'd be willing to speak on this, which I'm really honored to share in. Listening is love made audible. And my hope is that tonight, this is not Dave Shoemate, by the way. This is someone else. This is a wonderful stock image person. But I believe they're real. I tried to make sure we're not finding any AI people here tonight, okay? Listening is really vital and always has been, but I think maybe particularly now You may know this, it's quite famous, that this is probably the loneliest time in human history, which is really sad because there are a lot of image bearers around. You'd think that maybe we wouldn't be lonely. And yet we spend a lot of time away from other people. We spend time on our personal devices. They're not very interpersonal, but they're personal devices. And we spend time posting things, but that's very different than being in a relationship with people. If only we knew what we were designed to do here. You know, those questions I was asking when I was a teenager. If only we knew that there was a loving God who had designed us out of love and loving relationship that God had enjoyed forever and wanted us to be a part of that and designed us for loving relationship with other people like our neighbors. The reality is we're not just called to love our neighbors. We're designed to love our neighbors. We are made in God's image, and there are lots of ways that we get to be like God and to act like God. And one of them is to love our neighbor like God loves us. But we can't love without relationship, and we can't have relationship without communication, and we can't communicate well without first learning how to listen. So that's in some ways why we're starting where we are tonight, and that's the context of it too. My hope is that this doesn't just feel like tips for listening, and a little bit like Oliver's sermon this morning. We don't just need skills, right? We need to lean into the gifts that God has given each one of us, the spiritual ones and the other ones that have been designed into us as well. But the context is, how might we love our neighbors well? And how might we become the kind of image bearer who gets trusted by other image bearers and they want to share things with us? When I was growing up, my mom would tell me, God made you with 2 ears and only 1 mouth, and so you should probably listen twice as much as you speak. Evidently, that's a really old saying that goes all the way back to the ancient Greeks. A guy named Zeno. Wouldn't that be cool? Do you know anybody named Zeno? I don't know anybody named Zeno. I don't know why I'm picturing they would have a pizza joint. Maybe not. One of the things that Stuart's session bumped up into that I want to return to is Aaron's blessing from the book of Numbers, where Aaron is praying a blessing over God's people, and he says, "The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face toward you and give you peace." Listening is a key part of how God loves us. He turns his face toward us. He enjoys seeing us. And he will willingly give up some things, if that is possible, in order to listen to us. He's also a calming, non-anxious presence who wants to contribute toward shalom in our life, which is, I think, what's going on by giving us peace in the moment and that deep, deep, long peace. And I think tonight, my hope is you might take away 1 thing, 2 things that help you to learn how to mirror that posture that God has toward us, towards someone else that you might care about in your life. And we're going to start with the first of several little discussions at your table. Throughout the evening, there will be several of these. I would encourage you, if you want to find someone that you're not maybe already in deep relationship with, but if you would prefer to have a conversation with someone you're in deep relationship with, please trust your judgment. These are going to be some reps. Listening's a muscle just like anything else a human being can do. And it may be that you've got some really strong muscles over there, and that's great. It may be that this feels new to you. And that's all right. Everything tonight is going to be very doable wherever you're starting from. This is what we're going to do first. Just pair up with someone else at your table, or find someone near you if there's not someone at your table. And I'd love for you to talk about who is someone who has listened to you well. And would you just be willing to share about that with one another? Actually, I'm remembering this can just happen at your table. We don't need to pair up yet. We'll pair up here in a little bit. But just discuss at your table. Who's someone who has listened to you well? What difference did that make in your life when you felt listened to well? So we'll take a couple minutes for that, and I'll return here in a moment. Enjoy. Let's see if we can finish up in the next moment or so. Thank you. I know we had one table here with 3, and we had some tables with a whole bunch of people, so thank you for being patient. I'd love to hear, if you're willing, what are some things that stood out to you? What difference has listening made in your life? Someone be willing to share? Yes. Yes. Wonderful. Yeah. Being listened to well can help us learn how to listen well to other people. Thanks. What else? Yes, Colin. Mm-hmm. Mm. Yes. Curiosity is a superpower. Because if we choose to be curious, we can see things we couldn't have seen otherwise and do things we couldn't have done otherwise. And I think God welcomes us to curiosity. I think that's a pattern through the scriptures. Anyone else? Something that changed in you because of being listened to well? Yes, Scott?
I had a close friend of mine that I met at a conference that we were in together, and we had this exercise where we were kind of just sharing things about ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
It was something, it felt like it was, spirit-led, where he wasn't just listening to the things I was saying, but he was able to pick out things I wasn't saying.
Mm.
Things that I hadn't expressed, and understand things he never experienced.
Wow.
Kind of transcended like that, kind of that relationship even just with this person.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. Yeah. Yeah, there's not a huge distance between listening well to someone else and listening to the Spirit. We'll get back to that a little bit later. It sounds like you might have gotten to experience a little of that. That's wonderful. Now, I don't know about you, but I wish I were a great listener all the time. I think John believes I'm a great listener all the time, maybe. I don't know. Or he wouldn't have invited me to do this. I'm not a great listener all the time. My wife is back there. You can ask her. I didn't ask her to shout out amen at this point or anything like that, but I wish I were always a good listener. I'm growing in that. But I think what we need to look at as we move forward, where we're headed next, is what we do instead of listening. But I want to preview where we're headed this evening with a little agenda here. I didn't have printed agendas or anything, but I want you to know what we're about to cover together. So what we do instead of listening is, I think, really important, because each of us can only start from where we are. And part of where we're starting from is often some kind of barrier or hurdle, or we wouldn't be there, right? So where are we starting from? And I hope you feel lots of compassion from me in this section. The arc of relationship, we'll talk a little bit about how relationships grow and how listening is a part of that. The posture of listening, the physical, literal posture of listening actively and reflectively, asking questions, and then listening as a spiritual practice. I think we'll have time to get through all of those, but that's where we're headed. All right. So let's talk about what we do instead of listening. There are a couple of verses that came to mind as I was thinking about this section where James, for instance, reminds us to be quick to listen and slow to speak. He wouldn't need to bring that up if it weren't a problem. And he's probably speaking from experience. I don't know James, but I have this chosen image in my mind of James. I don't know if that's who it is or not, but anyway. In the Proverbs, I don't remember if this is Solomon or another writer here, but whoever answers before he hears the evidence is dealing foolishly and bringing shame upon himself. Obviously, we don't want to be that kind of person either who's has all the right answers. And by the way, I was absolutely like that as a little kid. I'm probably still growing out of that to some extent. I imagine there have been times that you've also not been listened to when you really wish that you were. And I'm sorry about that. I hope it wasn't me, but I'm sorry about it, that those kinds of things happen. We can lean into those moments in our memory just to realize the importance of listening. that there are moments when we wish that someone would have listened to us. And how painful that was, or how isolating that was, or how marginalizing that was, or whatever it was that you felt, as part of remembering that God has designed us for listening. And what a gift it is, an actual gift to someone else, when we choose to listen to them. Maybe even when we don't expect that there's any reason that we need to listen. There's usually a reason we need to listen. There's a quote that's ascribed to Gandhi. I think it was actually somebody else. This is one of those quotes. You're like, really? I thought that was Gandhi. That you must be the change that you wish to see in the world, you know. If we want people to be better listeners, well, you can be one if you like. And as we've already heard from some of you, it tends to have a positive effect on other people as well. So where are we starting from? What are the usual suspects of not listening? All right. I think that there are this many. And by the way, I'm guilty of all of these. So there's no judgment for me whatsoever. But these are the things we're often doing when instead of listening. Let me know if any of these feel familiar. If not you, maybe somebody sitting near you. Interrupting. I actually had to give up interrupting one year for Lent. I know Lent is not necessarily a practice here, but you can ask Allison. I gave up interrupting for Lent because I was so bad. I would interrupt all the time. I was just so eager, but it was very rude, Waiting to speak, Now, there are times when you're waiting to speak. I don't know, like when there's a series of people who are going to come up and speak and you're the next person to speak. But a conversation is not usually the time to be like, okay, all right, and my turn, right? And people can feel that, I'm sure you felt it before when someone was just waiting to speak. That's not the same as listening. Overreacting, maybe without words, maybe with words to what's going on. That's not creating a space where the other person feels that listening's still happening. Daydreaming. Which can happen with or without a phone. Phones are not very helpful for this either. You're not listening, right? Might come to mind there. Or even judging or nitpicking, all right? Now, I want to pause on this for a moment and not to give us a hard time, but to ask us to gauge where we're starting from. Is it possible, and I'm not going to ask anybody to share this, all right? So this is a question for you. Is there one on this list, or maybe two of these, that you find are unique barriers that you experience to listening? That when you find it's challenging for you to listening, it's probably one of these that you're doing instead. We're not going to take a long time, but I want us to take like 10, 15 seconds for you just to acknowledge this, because this will be part of growing, to recognize, oh, there's something I'm doing instead. And I might need to set that down in order to pick up listening, if that makes sense. So take a moment and just see which one or which two do you believe you're starting from? I didn't ask him this in advance, but I'm going to have Graham come up. And could we get the microphone again?
Can I say something? I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Were you waiting to speak? So I'm going to give you the mic. I would just love to hear about something that you had going on in your day today.
So this morning, I was wanting to sleep in, and
I've totally wanted to sleep in before, by the way.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Yeah, and so I have 3 little kids who are 8, 6, and 3. And
I'm sorry, were you saying something? Keep going.
Yeah, and I was trying to sleep in, like I was telling you, and I have 3 kids, and our youngest.
I don't know if you remember, I also have 3 kids.
Oh, that's good to know. Good to know. Yeah, I forgot about that. And so our youngest, he came in at like 6 a.m., maybe 5:45, and he comes in with a lot of energy, and so we were, I was sleeping with Casey, and we tried to lock the door, but he kept on knocking on the door, and so we just.
I hate it when kids do that.
Yeah, it's the worst. And so finally we locked the door, and and then he started talking under the door because he likes to do that, and so after that finally I just kind of gave up, and Casey wanted to sleep in, so I let her sleep in. I was a good husband in that moment.
That's a good move, Graham.
Yeah, and so then I started walking down the stairs with Asher, and we went down, and I tried to make some coffee, but he wouldn't stop talking. So I just sat down and talked with him for a bit and made him a bowl of cereal, because that's what he has to have every morning before, everybody has to have a bowl of cereal before they start their day. But yeah, so Asher and I sat there for a while at 6:30 this morning while I was attempting to make
You know what this is reminding me of? This is reminding me of this other story I'd like to tell instead. You mind if I just jump in here? Because I'm not actually going to. I want you to finish your story because this is a really great story, but I'm really grateful that you were part of this.
I got you. Absolutely. So thank you for letting me talk. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And so then finally, Casey came down at like 8:15 or 8:30 after I fed all our kids and did all that. So yeah, that was it.
Thanks, Graham. Let's give him a round of. Okay. That was awkward, right? Graham and I have a lot of money in the trust bank account, so thank you for letting me withdraw some of that. It was for a good cause. Justin, I'd love to go to the next slide here, because this is what can often happen without a microphone, typically. There's not usually a microphone with the tug of war, but in any conversation, or actually in any relationship where you're going to communicate, sometimes communication becomes a microphone tug of war. And to me, it's helpful to have that image in mind of actually like, there's a microphone and I'm seizing it, or I'm wanting to take it back, or I'm not wanting you to have it, or I'm not paying attention to that you have it. And I'm just curious, because that probably felt really strange to all of you. What kind of vibe did that create for what Graham was trying to communicate? Like, how was that for you, experiencing that strange tug of war? Shout it out if you want. Awkward? Yeah. Rude, distracting, yeah, yeah. I was just pretending to be rude, okay? I'm actually rude some other times, but I think I was just pretending at that point. You could imagine what it might be like if I invited Graham up here. I'm not going to do it again, but if I invited Graham up here and just let him hold the mic till he's done speaking. Maybe even once he's done speaking, just let it have a beat or two, There's nothing dangerous about silence, Just let it have a beat or two. Listening is a lot less like trying to grab the mic, and it's a lot more like another analogy that we use sometimes of walking a mile in another person's shoes, So just being with them and receiving them. And I know that conversation has two sides to it, and we're really going to talk about the listening part tonight. But I want you to know both sides of the conversation are really important. It's just that we tend to be better at the talking part than we do at the listening part. And that changes even what the other person is willing to share, if we're listening or not listening. There's some real benefits to listening. You could imagine for the person being listened to, some of you shared these things already, feels like relief that someone's listening to me, maybe dignity, maybe it's bringing some emotional clarity, maybe you feel honored or valued. But there's also benefits for the listener, because you're getting to share in someone else's experience that you have not lived. Your life can get deeper and broader and richer because of the lives of others. You get to practice humility. You get to gain wisdom, hopefully. And my guess is that each one of us, when we woke up in the morning, before or after our cereal, which I don't know if you all ate, I did not eat my cereal this morning, so I hope that's all right. It's very possible that every time you wake up in the morning, you're convinced of a lie. I am, which is that I'm convinced I'm the center of the universe. Any of you struggle with this? Maybe it's just me. We can start a little club, then just say, like, wow, we struggle with being the center of the universe. I think this is called a church, by the way. When we say we struggle with feeling like we're the center of the universe. You're not. I'm not. And what a relief that is, actually. Listening is part of the reminder that I'm not the center of the universe. Whenever you choose to listen, you are remembering that you are a minor character in the big story that God is up to. Not the hero. What a burden it would be to be the hero. to be carrying the world, to be carrying everything, to try to make everything work or make sense or whatever the case may be. So wherever you're starting from with your hurdle, I think God forgives you, particularly if you ask. But that might be the thing to set down consciously as you move forward. I'd love for us to look next at a kind of framework here. I'm going to call this the arc of relationship. But this is 3 steps that I think we're called to grow into relationship with one another. The first is A, for attention. And we're going to actually spend most of our time this evening on attention, even though we're going to use this as a way to walk through the evening. Attention, remembering, and connection. Attention. Listening begins with attention. You know, I couldn't have listened to Graham here. I wasn't listening to Graham when I was walking away or looking somewhere else or grabbing the microphone. I was not listening. I was not giving him my attention. Or sometimes in English we use this interesting metaphor of paying attention to someone else, which is really interesting, right? So listening begins with attention. In some ways it grows through remembering. We'll reach that part in our time together. It leads to connection. And when those are present, almost anything good can happen in a relationship. There's a wonderful, I think it's a wonderful movie called Lady Bird. If you've seen it, you're about to be reminded. If you've never seen it before, it's the story of an adolescent girl who's growing up and going to a Catholic school and trying to figure out who she is. And she has named herself Lady Bird. It is the name she has given herself, and so she puts it in quotation marks whenever she writes her name. And it's a delightful film. But this is a conversation she has with one of the women at her school. And the woman decides to give her some feedback on something she's seeing in her. And she makes a connection here that I just want us to notice here. So let's see this clip.
I read your college essay. You clearly love Sacramento.
I do?
You write about Sacramento so affectionately and with such care.
Well, I was just describing it.
Well, it comes across as love.
Sure. I guess I pay attention.
Don't you think maybe they are the same thing? Love and attention.
Yeah, good question, right? In your own life, don't you think they are often the same thing, love and attention? That someone is choosing to pay attention to you, perhaps, right? In a way, all of listening and everything we'll talk about tonight belongs in this attention category, right? Because listening is practice in paying attention to someone else. Something that we're designed for, but something that we don't just come out of the womb already mastering, typically, right? But we're going to use ARC as our structure for this evening, too, and we're going to talk about some other aspects of listening that in some ways bump up into these other categories as we walk through all these parts. So let's take a look at attention next. And we're going to talk about the posture of listening, all right? I'm sure that I'm not the first person to bring up posture with you. And I'd love for us to look at 2 pictures here of people in conversation, technically in conversation with one another. I don't know if you can see them clearly enough. But this one on the left here, 2 men at a table together, the other one, man and woman sitting at a table. What differences do you notice between these conversations? Does any of the posture convey to you whether there's listening going on or not? Just shout out what you notice. Lack of eye contact on one, absolutely. They're facing each other in the one on the right. Anything else you notice? That's right, facial expression. Yeah, this guy with the phone looks like he's about to fall asleep. The other guy, he's got a very open posture. He looks like he's smiling, even from here. Yeah. Our posture conveys whether we're paying attention or not, often. And again, I wish that whenever we were choosing to pay attention, that our body would just be like, in attention mode, right? But sometimes we have to practice these things until they become more natural to us. I'm going to walk through some things here. And the goal is not to pretend to do these things so that we convey that we're actually listening when we're not listening. The reason I'm bringing these up is, just like any other kind of posture, I'm sure that before you've realized, oh, I'm not sitting up straight, or I'm not standing up straight. Okay, you can try that if you want, right? Same thing here, right? If you'd recognize you're not naturally doing some of these things, okay, try them out if you want, right? Let's take a look at this next slide where there are some external postures and then some internal postures, all right? You could imagine an external posture of turning toward someone as opposed to just turning wherever direction you're already turning, right? Of choosing to turn toward them, of putting your phone away or out of sight, particularly if it's going to be a longer conversation, of making eye contact. One of you shared that earlier. Eye contact is huge. It is huge. It's a really big deal to practice. And even an open posture, right? Like this is not an open posture. Now, maybe you don't feel intimidated by that, but this feels very different than just being open. You might practice some of these if they don't come naturally to you. Not glancing around, but actually staying with the other person, staying present. These communicate. These are nonverbals, right? There's also an internal posture, I believe. And we mentioned curiosity. Someone mentioned curiosity already. Colin. We can choose curiosity toward one another. And in fact, I think when we choose curiosity, listening will just start happening with someone else in a way that's that brief. But there's an advanced part of this too, which is to choosing to love the other person in advance. I'm not sure if you've heard of this idea before. It's been going on for quite some time in human history, thank God, right? God chooses to love us in advance, and that changes his posture toward us. And we are invited, I believe, to love one another in advance. Even if that other person is a complete stranger, or you had a bad experience with them before, or they're in close relationship with you, but you don't feel that close right now, or they're your best friend, that we can choose to love the other person in advance. And in fact, I'd recommend it. I think you're going to have a better experience in that conversation or that relationship if you're choosing to love the other person in advance. It's not nearly as expensive as it might sound to love other people in advance. It kind of feels like what we're designed for when you practice it. So we're going to have some more practice right now. And we're going to practice some posture, but we need a context for practicing posture. So here's how it's going to work. We're actually going to have 2 rounds of the same question. A very famous question that's not really a question in our culture. You know, people ask, how are you? You know, like with a period. There's no question mark on it. How are you? You know, you've gotten this question before, and you're supposed to say what? I don't know. Good, yeah, fine. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, you might say busy, but this is a question that has like a one-word answer. No one's listening to the answer, probably, right? There are ways of asking how are you that actually sound like there might be an answer that's longer than one word and that maybe you haven't even stopped to realize yet or that no one's given you permission to share yet. Like, how are you? You hear how that sounds a little different? So we're going to have practice with each of these. And I want to invite you to pair up at this point. So find somebody near you. And in this first round, you're going to ask each other, how are you, as a throwaway statement. And the other person can, respond with whatever you're doing. But practice bad listening posture, please. Would you would you choose to have some bad posture? Yeah, Oliver, I see you folding your arms. Whatever it is that you choose, go ahead and practice. I think when we're embodied, it helps us to know what we're actually doing. And we can choose some bad stuff and we can choose some good stuff here in a moment. So let's start with this for a moment and then we'll come back with a better round here in a moment. So how are you as a statement? Bad posture, please. Have fun. Have to take the real round here. Okay, So here's the second round. All right? I think you've had enough time to ask a non-question here and practice bad listening posture. We don't want to get too deeply ingrained. All right. Man, you all love each other. Look at this. This is great. Okay, we're gonna have a second round here, which is gonna capitalize on what you're already trying to do here clearly, which is have a nice conversation with one another. Please take a second round and ask, "How are you?" like it has a real answer. This would be a great time to practice excellent posture, including, I would say, especially eye contact. Practice your eye contact with that other person. And if you're willing, when you're being asked, try to share how you actually are. All right, but the main practice here is the listening, and then we'll switch roles. All right, let's try this. If you haven't already switched roles, make sure that you're giving the other person practice too. All right. Let's share a little bit about our experience here. I love what's happening right now, by the way. This is fantastic. I love the looks on your faces. I love how engaged you are. The posture is amazing. So you got to experience some bad posture, some not really asking, how are you, and some genuine. What was the difference like for you personally, whether you were the one speaking or the one listening? What was the difference like between these? What was the difference in your... Thank you for asking. Appreciate that. What was the difference for you in the pretending to listen, bad posture, and actually asking someone, how are you, and listening? Graham? Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. For sure. Was the second one painful? Takes more leaning in. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. Someone else. Yes. Ashton. Yes. Yeah. It's like it sounds like permission to answer the question. And it sounds like you're sticking around to hear my answer. Yeah, for sure. Anyone else? Difference? Allison? Hmm. That's right. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah. Not everything we're designed for will come comfortably, but the Spirit does welcome us into listening, for sure. Thanks for sharing that. The first act of love is attention, where we actually turn our face toward one another, a little bit like what God does to us. And I wonder who you might turn your face toward and ask, how are you? And listen. There might be someone coming to mind. There might be somebody that you sit next to or near in church next week, or that you see and you've never seen before, or that you see and you've seen them many times and you've never met. And by the way, there's another really easy thing. It's not very hard at all, but that we often forget how to do, which is to say something like this: hi, I'm Will. Right? There are little tiny hurdles between us and other people. They're not as big as we think. They're really small ones, like, hi, I'm Will. How are you? And then if you want, you can just sit there and listen, you know? Often that's what happens, because this is the first time anyone's given that person permission to share what's going on in their life. But maybe you get into a conversation, and maybe it is awkward, and maybe that person doesn't end up becoming your best friend. But those kinds of actions, I think, are what we're designed for. They're part of attention. So let's move on to remembering. My guess is that people you're in relationship with, you've done more than just listen to one another, you've remembered one another. And whenever you've gotten to know someone that probably early in the relationship, you felt like you were making progress because you remembered one another. And I don't just mean like, oh, they remember your name. That's the start, that's helpful. It's good for us to try to learn one another's names, even if it takes a while. But they remembered something about you. They remembered something that you shared with them. They maybe sent you a text and said, hey, I saw this and I thought about you, right? I mean, these kinds of things are an important part of a relationship growing. We couldn't possibly remember things about someone else until we've started to listen to them, right? We're going to have to start there. We get to start there. We get to listen to one another so that we can remember one another. And when we remember something about someone, we're saying, in essence, you matter enough for me to carry part of your story with me. And now we can reconnect. And our story, your story, my story can overlap for a few minutes again, maybe. And it can be fun. Like you can have inside jokes with people, right? Or you can know that thing about your barista's hobby that nobody else knows because nobody thought to ask them. Or you can have a joke that you get to share. Or you know what's going on in their life right now, even though they live next door to a lot of other people too, but they also live next door to you, and you asked about that one day. So we're going to learn a little bit. Maybe you already know this, but we're going to remind her. I'm going to learn again, all right? This is my posture. I'm going to learn this again. I'm going to try to have a beginner's mindset here. We're going to learn about active listening and reflective listening, because there's a way that we can build on the posture that we're bringing to someone else and ask, well, what's going on when they're talking? Right? Because it could just be one of those usual suspects, right, that's going on. What do we want to replace that with, God willing? Not sure if you've heard of active listening before. It doesn't mean that you're like squinting your ears really hard. I don't know how you do that. Anyway, if you know, come tell me. What it does mean is that your mind and heart are engaged with them. And there are actually some ways you can practice this as well. So I want to introduce you to some of those, because some of them could be your nonverbals that we've just talked about. I saw a lot of people's not just posture change, but the expression on your face change and how you were looking at them and so on. These things are part of conveying, I am listening to you. But also filler words. And some people do this naturally, and some people do not do this naturally. And if you don't do it naturally, it's totally up to you whether you want to try this on for size or not. But have you ever had someone listen to you, and while you're sharing with them, they say, huh, oh, wow, right? Now, I don't know the effect it's had on you, but often I'm like, this person is listening to me, Like I can tell they're listening to me. They're not grabbing the mic. Those sound like things that they're coming out of their mouth, but they're not trying to grab the mic. They're with me. They're right there with me. What about spoken gratitude? Like, thank you for sharing that. I'm really honored that you would share that with me, or whatever kind of gratitude makes sense at that point. Maybe even just engaging with, and then what happened, right? We're going to get into questions a little bit later, but this is a way of listening actively right now. Well, what about reflective listening? This was something I didn't learn anything about until a couple of years ago. I was in a guys group. I was telling Joseph about this earlier. A guys group where I was the only believer, and I learned a lot from these image bearers. And they allowed me to be an image bearer who believed in God pretty openly in that group, and I'm still praying for all of them. But they taught me about reflective listening, and I want to share it with you because I think it's wonderful. When someone has shared something with you that clearly was important to them, that they don't just share with anybody, or that they're trying to talk something out and they're using you as that sounding board, it can be a real gift to ask them, could I just reflect back to you what I think I'm hearing you saying? I want to make sure I'm getting it right. I want to make sure I'm hearing you well. And then you just take a moment to say, sounds like this is going on, and you're kind of navigating this, and you've got questions in your mind right now, but this is what's becoming clear. Does that feel fair to what you've shared? Is that what you're saying? I don't know if has anybody anybody do that for them before, kind of reflect something back? I'm guessing you weren't like, yeah, I hated it. Right? You're probably like, that was nice. That was a real gift. I've had the privilege of doing this many times, and the other person, when I was sharing, sometimes even back their own words, they were like, yeah, like a realization, like they just said it. I was telling it back to them. But even hearing their own words back was a kind of affirmation, and it helped them to feel like they were making some progress. There's an analogy here, I think, when we're listening to people and we're actively listening so that they feel permission to keep sharing. In a way, it's like helping them get all of their Legos out onto the table. You know? They're not put together, they're not assembled yet sometimes, you know. They may not all make sense with one another, but if we're patient, they can just get all their Legos, and we can help them get all their Legos out on the table, even if they don't want us to do anything with them. But just help to get them out. And you know, I wish we were not living in the loneliest time in human history, but there is not like, oh yeah, 12 people today offered to just let me talk things out with them. No, that doesn't happen. This is a gift that we give one another. So we're going to practice this, all right? And you do not need to be great at it yet, all right? It's perfectly okay that you're starting from where you are. We're going to practice just receiving. You can keep up your posture if you want. If it feels like, whoa, posture and active and reflective listening, just practice the active and reflective listening. That would be okay too. Just respond with these active nonverbals. Try them on for size. Wow, whatever feels appropriate. Don't just like say, wow, okay. You know how this kind of thing works. And then ask to reflect back what you've just heard. All right? That's what we're going to do. And we're going to share with each other, would you tell me about one of the best friends you've ever had? Now, I realize all these questions we could take like the rest of the time just listening to one another about. So please, listen for a little while, ask to reflect back what you're hearing, but then switch roles. Right? So let's use learning about one another's best friends or one of the best friends you've ever had. Listen actively. In fact, we can come back to the slide here in a moment about the active listening, just so you remember what that looks like, to try it on for size. Thanks, Justin. We'll come back to that one now. Yeah, that one right there. So try some of these things out, and then ask permission to reflect back what you've heard. Thanks. If you haven't already, go ahead and switch roles. Sorry, my mic wasn't on earlier. I hate to interrupt you because these seem like amazing conversations. You're already great at this. I think I could just close in prayer right now and I think we'd be all right. I'm very curious. What did it feel like to be listened to in that way? Anybody be willing to share? What was it like to be listened to in that way? Hmm. It is such a gift. Yeah, thanks, John. Someone else? Yes, Catalina? Yeah, it does feel like a hug. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah. Yeah, I think sometimes when we're shy, all of us are shy at times, some of us are shy more often, and listening is, I don't know, it's almost like a room you're inviting someone into that's very comfortable, and we can sit down and stay for a while, and it feels safe, and it feels like a good place to be. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. What did you like about listening that way? Scott? Hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It does. Yeah. And if we're trying to replace one of those usual suspects, it's a good thing to have an assignment. That's a doable assignment, and that will be a gift to the other person as well as to our relationship with them. Yeah. Anyone else? What What did you like about listening in that way? What did you notice, Michaela? Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. For sure. Yeah. Thanks. What didn't feel natural yet? Anyone willing to share? Oh, a couple of, wow. Okay. Maybe we should be asking more questions like this. Can we start here? Yes. Yes. Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Uh-huh. There's a place for me too, and there's a place for just allowing that other person's story to be valuable. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. There's a couple other people. Remind me. Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. Okay. Yeah. And please hear me. Like the goal isn't that I'll be watching all of you, and if any of you are speaking to anyone, that's not the goal here. The goal is to have enough practice listening that we can offer that gift to one another, and so we might even be able to gain better instincts about when to speak as opposed to listen, and that both of them will continue to be valuable. Yeah. And then someone over here. Yes, Joseph.
I would agree, it does feel like a hug. I don't know if I'm allowed to,
Go for it.
strangers, you know?
Okay.
It
Uh-huh.
feels very
Yeah.
vulnerable. Like,
Yes.
listening is like you're inviting someone
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So then when it's like, well, I don't know if I want to invite you into my house. It's like,
Sure.
it's very dangerous.
Yeah, okay.
Are we allowed to listen in deeply for people that
It's a good question. Yes. Go for it, Angelica. Jump in. mm. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm. Yes. Uh-huh. Yes. 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 Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This. Go for it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm. Mm. Okay. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Yes. 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 Yeah. These are really helpful things that you're all noticing here because, just like I mentioned earlier, we are all starting from where we are currently, and we didn't just happen to be here. We arrived here through the story that God has allowed into our life, the things that we've experienced, the things that feel healed, the things that don't feel healed, the things that we feel great at now, the things that we don't feel great at yet. There's all kinds of things walking into each of these conversations, and we are learning more about ourselves in some ways through these too. And that's good. Like, it's at least part of what God can work together for good, even if it doesn't feel good yet. And yes, there's going to be wisdom, right? I would hope, and there's going to be respect, appropriate respect. And but even, like you mentioned, I'm not sure if I know your name yet, next to Angelica here. Joy, yeah. But you shared that this may create for some of us a new way of relating to somebody of the opposite sex in ways that are appropriate or that we can find to be appropriate. So I really appreciate all that you've shared here. These are all really valid ways of dealing with what we're encountering here. Yeah. All right. Let's take a look at connection. We begin relationships with attention. We listen well. And we move into remembering. And relationships where we're remembering, where we are remembered and we're remembering the other, they typically start to form connection. And when you're in a connected relationship, you have a relationship that is fertile enough that life-giving things can happen. And my hope is that you're at least in one of those relationships right now with someone, that there's a connected relationship where life-giving things can happen. And I would love to hear from you all, what kinds of things can happen when you're in a connected relationship with someone? That's not a trick question. There are lots of answers to this. What kinds of things can happen when you're connected with someone in a relationship? Yes? Uh-huh. Yes. Thanks, Catalina. Open to direction, feedback, advice. Yes. What else? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. Absolutely. We have things for one another. This is the body of Christ. This is how it works, right? So there may be opportunity within relationship where we can help one another or connect one another in some way. Yes, Colin. Mm. Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. Mm. Mm. Yes. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. 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 It can be hard, yes. It doesn't necessarily need to be. I imagine some of you have traveled somewhere before that's different from where you live. And maybe you've traveled somewhere that's so different from where you live that if someone said, so what does this place have in common with your hometown? Or where the landscape where you grew up? And if you said nothing, that doesn't mean like, so I hate this place as a result. It doesn't, like if God made all the places of the world, you can travel somewhere and appreciate it. Even if Even if you're using words like it has a stark beauty to it or whatever, whatever code words you want to assign. We get to travel into the lives of others by listening. And sometimes we find familiarity and connection, and sometimes we find foreignness. There's literal foreignness going on in the world right now. There's not one country. There's nearly 200 countries in the world. And there are just as many kinds of foreignness that we can bump up into in other people. But that can be like traveling. That doesn't need to, and I hope you don't hate traveling. That can feel like a real privilege to travel into someone else's life where everything is unfamiliar. And you got to travel and come back into your own life. Yeah. What other kinds of things can happen, Oliver?
I think that a lot of
Healing, yeah.
sometimes, like if you sit down with like a counselor or whatever, and that's your job, you'll just dump a whole bunch of stuff because finally somebody's going to listen to you. And they'll stop after like 45 minutes and be like, "That's quite a lot of stuff you got there."
Yes.
Recognizing like competition and just the speed, like there's not like life doesn't present time to consult some of the small things that are awful. You know what I mean? Like just your marriage changed or whatever, and so now that season's over, so you didn't grieve it. But no one's gonna stop and be like, "Hey, did you grieve the season that your marriage changed?"
Yeah.
But it's like
Yeah.
it's important. It's
Yes.
important, and you don't know it's important. So that's I was like counseling with us is different than just like having coffee with somebody every day.
Mhm.
Expect it all the time, but like certainly you slow it down a little, and it would gives somebody a chance to like talk about something that hurts that probably doesn't feel important when life's too fast,
Yes.
and you can't feel it until it gets talked about, and so it's like
Absolutely.
slowing that down just gives you a chance to be like, oh, that actually does matter,
Mm-hmm.
and nobody else knows it.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I love that. There's so many moments in our life that if they go unnoticed or unmet by anyone else, then we can just carry them around or sit with them or not grieve them or whatever the case is. And I think we are invited as image bearers that God made for community. We're made to love one another. That life together, which is how Dietrich Bonhoeffer talked about it, or the beloved community, which is how Martin Luther King Jr. talked about it, is what we're designed for. We are designed to experience life with other image bearers. Even if we're not in committed long-term relationship with them, that's okay. We are designed for life together. And those small moments, I think, are often just as important. Maybe even sometimes more important, because it's like, well, yes, this thing everyone knew about, the ACL, everyone knew about that, but not everyone knew about that one thing that you got to have that conversation about, that you got met in. Yeah. So even though listening begins with the attention stage, it can get deeper through thoughtful questions. And this is where many people feel like they don't have any instincts, or like, I'm bad with questions. I hear this a lot. Or I don't know how to ask any questions. It's like people saying, I'm not creative. Everybody's creative. Like, we are designed in God's image. We are creative. You might just have not discovered your way of being creative yet. Yes, I forgot to mention that. Connection can happen when safety and curiosity meet. Safety is an important skill to learn as well. That's not just going to happen by accident. I don't think we're going to lean into that a lot tonight unless you've got questions around that. But asking questions is something that all of us can get better at. It needs some practice to get stronger. And it's a muscle too, just like listening. And if any of you have been to the gym, you can notice other people's technique. That is also a way of learning, right? You can ask for help as you're getting reps. You can have somebody spot you, Say like, how did that land? Because I was just trying that out, all right? You can do all those things with anything that you're learning too. And so we're going to walk through a couple scenarios here that I'm guessing you bump into. This is one of them, meeting people for the first time. Maybe that happened tonight. I don't know, meeting people for the first time. You know what people ask when they meet someone for the first time? We all know this. What do people ask? Shout it out. Yeah, what's your name? What do you do for work? That's it, right? We are a walking name tag for our job. That's it. That's all there is to us. Now, if you've asked this, I've asked those questions too. Those are perfectly fine questions to ask. But sometimes we're like, those are the two questions. I asked them and I'm out. Like, where do we go from here? There are lots of questions you can ask when you're meeting someone for the very first time. And there are endless, lists of them. These are just some of them here. Like, hey, what's your Roger? Okay, Roger, what's the best thing going on in your life right now? I don't know if you've ever had somebody ask you like that out of the blue. I don't know if it feels like what you're talking about, Joseph, but sometimes you're like, that, I did not expect that question, but I will share that with you, right? Or maybe I feel comfortable sharing this much. Sometimes when it's a place like Citylights, here's another little cue for how you can love your neighbor at Citylights. How did you get connected here? Or how long have you been coming to Citylights? That's often a story. That's like the tip of an iceberg of a story. That's not like a factoid, right? We don't want to be asking each other factoid questions like, so yes or no, such and such. No? Okay, next question. Yes or no, this, right? Or what's the number? Okay, tell me. Okay, you got the number, right? Let's see if we can ask questions that open up the other person, that maybe allow them to access some of the story that they've lived, that they feel comfortable sharing with you. What's something that's brought you joy recently? What's the best thing going on in your life right now? I have some friends who ask that question frequently. What's a great book or film you've experienced in the last year? Have you traveled anywhere this year? Where are you from originally? Oh, you grew up here. Has anything changed over time? Right? Like a lot of these questions like suggest other kinds of questions, which we'll get to here in a moment. But these are good conversation starters. None of these are rocket science. I don't think any of these are super scary like, or I'm going to say this, but what's going to happen? I don't think anything dangerous happens after these, typically. All right? Maybe you could write down one or two you'd like to try out in a conversation with someone. But I'd like to talk about questions for taking a conversation deeper. And here's where I'd like to share an analogy. I'm sorry that, I think you can see the text on here. I'm not able to see the text on here, but when we're in a conversation, questions are often like listening for metal detector moments. I don't know if you've ever used a metal detector. True confessions, I have never used a metal detector. So if what I'm about to say is incorrect, forgive me. I think that when you're using a metal detector and there's something metallic under the surface of the ground, there will be a beeping sound. Does this sound right? Okay, all right. So these moments happen when you're listening to someone else. There's no literal beeping. But when you're attentive to them, when you're present with them, when you're paying attention to them, eye contact, listening, you're involved actively, you will notice things that feel like they have more emotional weight to them, or that they feel like there's a story behind that. And again, I love the advice that everyone brought in earlier. Is it appropriate just to ask at every point for them to tell that to you? It depends on where you are in that relationship, right? I mentioned earlier, Graham and I have a long-standing relationship, and analogically, there's a lot of money in our relationship bank account, to spend out of. If you're in a new relationship with someone, or if you're in a relationship with somebody that's not in a great space right now, you may have a fairly low balance in that. And I'm about to use like a last millennium example, but you don't want to bounce checks. Anybody remember checks? All right? Or you don't want to get an overdraft fee on your account by overspending the relationship, right? That is an attentive thing to do. But maybe you are in a relationship where you could take the conversation deeper. And there are not too challenging ways of doing that. They could work in almost any conversation. What feels important about that to you? Or what was that like for you when that happened? Or when they said that, how did that land with you? Or even just, could you tell me more about that? Sometimes I find that people share things and they're like, yeah, and so I just felt, this particular way. And it's not obvious to me so why did you feel that way? Or you felt that way because why? And again, like we're listening for where their conversation was wanting to go. This is the principle. It's not mic grabbing, right? It's not saying, thank you for sharing. Now I have an amazing question that I would like to ask. This is allowing the conversation to go deeper into them, to go deeper into what's important to them. Yes, it's amazing to also share at some points what's going on in your life or what connects or what you've experienced that's like that, or even to offer to share something into their life. We'll talk about this here in a moment, but this is its own kind of ability. This is its own kind of gift to give one another, to ask questions that are cooperating with what they're sharing and allowing them to share deeper. There are also some other ways to take conversations deeper. I brought 4 examples here tonight. You're welcome to come and look at these afterwards. There are a couple of other ones up on here. Anybody seen any of these conversation decks where there are cards and you pull out a card and talk about it? For you that may feel like, whoa, that's weird, or that may feel like, that sounds amazing, because to have the questions there would be really helpful at dinner time with the kids, by the way, which we do this every now and then with our kids at the table, or with a couple that we just met at church and they're coming over for the first time. We're like, we have no idea what to talk about. Great. This is like permission to have the questions provided to you. There are all kinds of versions of these. I would recommend those if this is a place that you'd like to grow. There's also another example I want to share with you. I think this one's really wonderful. If you're in a married relationship with somebody, or if you're like deep friends with somebody, this is like next level, okay? We're just putting it out there. I think this is the next slide. Yeah, this is Arthur and Elaine Aaron. They're both psychologists. And years ago, they study kind of loving relationships and curiosity. I think those are some of the things that they've studied. And they identified a series of 36 questions that they demonstrated through research that if two people who may not even know each other before are willing to ask one another and to listen to the responses to these questions, they will bring those two people closer in that time frame than anything possible imagined. And these are not bizarre questions. They start out really, surface level, and then gradually they get a little more, deep. And this may be a thing you would like to do with a friend or with a loved one. You can find these online. I think it's free, lots of places. But Arthur and Elaine Aaron, Aron, and it's 36 questions. So if you look that up, you should be able to find it. Might be an interesting place to go. Yeah. So you might be wondering, hey, wait. We're believers. We're supposed to have like words to share with other people. Aren't we supposed to be like saying things to at some point in the conversation? What about my feedback? What about when I want to share and so on? And yes, I want you to hear, eventually it would be really wonderful for you to share, probably in lots of your conversations. It would be wonderful for you to share. And as you get better at listening, we'll probably discover better places to listen and to share. Typically, I'm finding that if I have any regret afterwards, it's more likely to be, I probably could have listened better, rather than like, I had these amazing things to share, and I am so bummed I was not able to share this. Yeah, there's a little regret there, but I find typically that the place where I think God is calling us to grow is in the listening and strengthening that listening muscle. Sharing's fantastic. Do it some other time. We're sharing with one another a lot tonight. We're getting practice in that too. But even just remember the example of Dave Shoemate in my own life. He did share eventually. But he was the first person to counsel me in large part because he didn't start out by counseling me. Many other people had started out by counseling me, and saying, I've got feedback about that, or I know where you're wrong, or whatever the case may be, how it came across. Dave was the first person who listened long enough that I wanted to know what he thought and what his counsel was. And my guess is you probably have people in your life too, the people you want to listen to, or the people you feel have heard you and listened to you. Not the people who just always have an answer for everything that they want to share before listening to you. You might even consider, asking this question. Would you like me just to listen? Or would feedback be helpful? This is another question I learned from my unbelieving friends in this guys group. Isn't it a great question? Whether you're in committed relationship with this person or whether you're a friend, sometimes people would just like to share. Men are evidently notorious for always being like, I've got a tool for that. You just wait. Let me get it out of my toolbox. This is going to be amazing. Sometimes, whoever it is, might just like to share. And if we'd like to share something back with them, maybe we should ask their permission if it feels like this is important to them. Yeah. Okay. We're going to have another practice in this. What we're going to do is we're going to practice a conversation where you get to ask some questions. And I hope I've picked a topic that's going to make it easier for you to ask some questions. But just see what questions come to your mind. And it could even just be like the tell me more kinds of questions. But maybe if you see something, if you hear something in the other person where you think, oh, yeah, that sounds like something you want to talk more about. Would you like to talk more about that? Or could you tell me more about that? Or how did that land? Or whatever it is. Now, we'll go back to the last slide if that's all right. Thanks. So pair up with somebody. It could be the same person. It could be somebody different. You want to make more than one friend tonight? That would be fine, right? So why don't we pick somebody different that you haven't talked to yet? Introduce yourself if you haven't. It goes like this. Okay? What's something that was unusually challenging for you recently? Now, you don't have to like go the deepest, darkest place if you don't want to, but just like something that was tough recently or unexpected. And then practice some question asking along the way and just see how that goes. And then we'll switch roles. All right? Do we feel ready for this? You're going to do great. It's going to be imperfect, and it's going to be great. All right? If you haven't already, go ahead and switch roles so the other person has practice. All right, let's see if we can wrap up there. Just like last time, these look like conversations that could continue for a long time. And it may be that some of them should continue beyond tonight. Just putting it out there. You've already waded in together. I feel like some of you are getting to know one another in new ways. Some of you might be making new friends tonight. In some ways, I hope this has created some permission to continue that relationship. Before I ask any questions, can I celebrate you for a moment? I saw lots of churning toward. I saw lots of eye contact. I saw lots of facial expressions. I know since this was like unusually challenging, sometimes it was like people laughing together. I saw grimaces on people's faces where you were joining the other person and what they must have been experiencing. Excellent work, everyone. Thank you for listening to one another so well. How was that for you? This was a more sensitive topic. How was that sharing and receiving? Catalina? Therapeutic. Yeah. Tell me more. What do you mean by that? That's enough. Okay. Fair enough. See, Joseph, we got some practice. Those who asked that question earlier, this is a great example, right? Yeah, thanks, Catalina. Someone else. How was that, either sharing or receiving a challenge? Yes? The connection, yeah. Yes. Yeah? Uh-huh. Wow. Wonderful. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. Catalina? Mm-hmm. Mm. Yes. Absolutely. Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. Did anyone feel a little bit lighter about their challenging thing just from sharing it with someone else? Yeah. And I'm guessing it wasn't because the other person said, well, I guess I will figure all that out for you, right? No, it's just from the listening. Any other experiences? How was that sharing, receiving a challenge? Yes. Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. Okay. Thanks for sharing that. Yes. Uh-huh. Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Go through the motions. Sure. Yes. Yes. And a lot of these things are like, when we learn something new, there's going to be a level of artificiality to it. Some of you actually teach in classrooms, right? That may not be exactly how those students end up using it later on. And I think of this often because my daughter has just started driving recently. When you first learn how to drive, you're like, am I looking the right way? Am I in my lane? And most of you drove here tonight, and I bet you didn't think about any of those things, right? So it's okay if there's a level of awkwardness at first, if this is a healthy, life-giving practice that God's calling you to. It'll be okay after a little while, and I'm sorry. But the beautiful news is you're not going to be in classes like this all the time. What you are going to be is in conversations where some of these things will come to the surface, and you can decide whether you want to listen to them and ask questions about them or not. And it's up to you. And that person can decide whether they want to share or not. And that's okay too. That will feel a lot more real in those moments, Casey. Yeah, yeah. What kinds of questions did you find you were able to reach for? Colin. Yeah. Why? Oh, okay. Yes. Mm-hmm. Hmm. Mm. Yeah. Okay. That's wonderful. Why? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Other questions you found yourself reaching for or that seemed to work? Because the conversations were clearly working. Let me just tell you from up here. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. Definitely. Yes. Uh-huh. Yep. That too. Yeah. Mm.
It's like getting, you talk about like the art, it's like just knowing more of like the story was helpful to me.
Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. That's wonderful. And if you're asking context questions while you're listening to someone, that they might feel that you are with them more in those places. Yeah. All right, we've got one-ish more topics. All right, and I know we're nearly at time, but I think we're going to make it. All right. Listening is a spiritual practice. I believe this is true. And my hope is that you've already experienced that at some point tonight. I know Catalina, you meant, and your friend, who I have not met yet, Trina, mentioned that you felt the Spirit's presence. Some others of you told me the same thing as I was walking around, that you felt that the Spirit was maybe suggesting things to you. Listening is godlike. There are lots of ways that we are made to think and act and feel like God. Not all the ways, right? But there are some ways. I do believe listening is like that. God is clearly listening, as I'm just going to talk about in a moment. But listening prepares us to listen to God's voice too. In other words, if you decide that you would like to grow in your ability to listen to others, that can also improve your ability to listen to the Spirit. And even, the heavens are declaring the glory of God, and we know in Romans that doesn't mean that everybody's listening to it. It can help us to listen to God through nature as well, and through the rest of what God has made. But I think prayer is a really wonderful reminder here, that prayer reminds us that God loves to listen to, and He loves to listen to you. And it's not just something He's like, okay, all right, you were persistent, but that the posture of God is to love to listen. That the Lord is near to all who call on Him, to all who call on Him in truth. That this is the confidence we have in our relationship with God. If we ask for anything in agreement with His will, He listens to us. That the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous and His ears are open to their prayers. What kinds of prayers? Yes. If the Psalms are any measure, right? What kinds of prayers does God want to listen to? Yes. Right? I was reminded of this as I was preparing the other day, but Mother Teresa was in an interview with Dan Rather before she passed away, shortly at the end of her life, though. And he was curious about her prayer life. I don't know if Dan is even a believer. I hope he became one through this. It would be kind of fun. But he said, what are you doing when you pray? And she said, well, often when I'm praying, I'm listening. And he said, oh, you're listening for what God says? She says, sometimes, but often He's listening too. And I don't know if you know what she means by that, but if you've ever spent time with a loved one or friend, sometimes you're just with each other. You're just aware of each other. You're present, as I think someone mentioned earlier. And sometimes there's communication, and other times there's presence. And in some ways, that might be what God has invited us into, but to pray without ceasing. But I want to come back here to Aaron's blessing. That the Lord makes His face to shine on us. I don't know if you've ever stopped and thought about that before. What do you think that means, that the Lord makes His face to shine on us? It might be that choosing to love us in advance. It might be, I don't know if any of you have felt the distinction between this, that God doesn't just love you, but that He likes you in Jesus. That He looks forward to listening to you. That when He looks at you, it makes Him smile. And I think it might help us to wonder, what might it look like for me to make my face to shine on someone else? Because that sure seems to be connected to listening. Actually listening to that other person. And so, as we're closing our time, I want to welcome you to consider what part of listening feels most natural for you, that maybe God has designed into you, that you can lean into, that you can give away as a gift to others. And the wonderful part about gifts, love that we're talking about this right now in church. Wonderful part about gifts God's given us is that we can give them away and give them away and give them away and still have them. All right, that's how you know it's a gift at that point. What part feels hardest, most challenging or stretching, but that God may be calling you into next, into a step of progress? Maybe there's someone who came to mind. Maybe there's someone who comes to mind right now. Who is one person that you might bless this week by listening to them? And I don't know about you, but I tend to grow a little bit at a time, maybe in 1 or 2 or 3 places. That's it, right? I can't grow in 15 places at a time. So I would invite you just to be curious as you move on with your evening and your life. What might be one step that God is calling you to try out? Because it might be anywhere in what we've covered tonight. It might be something I didn't even know to cover, but it came to your mind because the Spirit brought it to your mind, or it came out in one of your conversations. And this might be God inviting you to act a little bit like Him in the way that you choose to make your face to shine on someone else, and to listen to them, and to discover what might happen next. So we're going to close our time, and I want us just to listen for a moment to the Spirit, because it might be that the Spirit has something to share, and then I'll close this in prayer. Spirit, thank you that you listen so well to us. Thank you that you listen so well that when we don't even know the words to pray, that you pray for us. Thank you that you make yourself at home in us. Thank you that you know us because you've chosen to know us. Would you help us as we are learning how to love your other image bearers? That you would help us to listen well on purpose, that we would choose to turn our face toward others, that we would choose to make our face shine on them. Would you help us with these parts that you've designed into us that are meant to be given away, and would you also help us with these parts that don't come naturally? And would you allow listening to be a part of our life that is life-giving to us and to others, just like you've made it to be. In Christ's name, amen. Good evening, friends. Thank you for coming.